At the outset, I would like to congratulate the Business World team for having organized such a wonderful conclave. The agenda, I think you would have seen, very interesting. Again, I congratulate them for holding this in the most happening city of the world at Bangalore. Uh, Representing the government of Karnataka, let me tell you, we appreciate the value created by the startups. We appreciate the immense contribution given by the young, brilliant minds who have come over to this state from all over. Subject of what is possibly the role of state machinery in bringing about a right innovation culture. I would start by welcoming my co-panelist, Mr. Menon. Uh, at the outset, let me just run you through a picture as to where we stand. When I say we, I am speaking about the state of Karnataka. Karnataka is the world's fourth largest technological cluster. We proudly host about 13,000 plus tech startups. Majority of them are in deep tech and artificial intelligence. We have been ranked as the most innovative state many a times by Niti Aayog, specifically in 2019 and 20. 40% of unicorns, those who are valued at $1 billion plus, precisely the number is around 40. Currently, they are based out of Bangalore. Long list of unicorns waiting to become unicorns. Again, if we look at the current scenario of 2022 in specific, Bangalore topped the list of investment deals. We have inked almost 167 deals worth about $5.7 billion in just the first quarter of 2022. Thanks to all of you guys who have made all this happen. Again, a couple of more feathers in our cap. We are the best performing state in 2021. Again, when I speak of National Startup Awards, we have won almost 14 awards which were given by Government of India. Again, if you look at the amount of capital inflow at a global scale, forget about in Asia, Southeast Asia, we are ranked fifth globally, just behind San Francisco, Bay Area, New York, Boston. So we are here. I would just tell you the broad outset of what were the key regulatory initiatives that we at state of Karnataka have done, which have allowed us to get placed like this. The first one I would like to recollect is the first startup policy. Karnataka was the first state to announce a dedicated startup policy. Way back in 2015, this policy was announced and brought into effect in 2015. It made a huge difference. Basically, if I just have to highlight few salient features out of that policy, we opened up a lot of incentives towards reimbursement of GST. We applied thought. We came out with policies to support startups on reimbursing their marketing costs, on their research costs. Even minutes like patenting costs were covered in this policy. Other major thing we realized was, we being the largest buyers, government is the largest buyer. So if we don't give preferential access to startups, whom will they sell to? To start with, we opened up our market. We made drastic changes in Karnataka Transparency in Public Procurement Act, which guides the government procurements. We gave preferential access to the startups. So without sort of stretching it too far, I would say another major initiative was the Karnataka Innovation Authority. We passed an act and allowed regulatory sandboxes to be set up, wherein somebody is experimenting in a very controlled manner as a startup, we allowed a lot of relaxation of regulatory mechanisms. With this background, with this kind of initial remarks, I want to sort of call upon my friend Mr. Menon, who has been a part of the industry for so long and who has worked with governments all across at a national level and with various state governments, to offer his comments as to how does he see the role of state in moving on from just being a regulator to an enabler. What is your take, Mr. Menon?
Thank you, Dr. Harsha, and morning, everyone. Let me start off by thanking Business World for inviting me to share my thoughts on this forum. You know, Dr. Harsha, if I can give you an analogy, not a very good analogy, but I look at the role of the state as creating the infrastructure for innovation and entrepreneurship. And if I can be, to go back to the analogy, I look at the state as playing the role of the grandparents. Now, if you look at urban India, we have nuclear families largely, parents, 1 or 2 children. And what do the grandparents do? They fill a gap, right? They fill the gap, whether it is emotional, whether it is physical. They are there. Urban India, several cases, both husband and wife are working, so the child is alone. It could be fiscal, monetary support for schooling in a better school and so on and so forth. Ultimately, innovation, entrepreneurship has to be done by a set of individuals who come together. Whether you're developing the next technology product or you're coming up with business or process innovation, it has to be a bunch of people who have to do it. What the state has done, and this has been successfully done, Karnataka, as you mentioned, is the leader. And I think the southern states, Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, have been literally in the forefront. What has happened is, when I say the infrastructure for innovation and entrepreneurship, at one level it is physical, right? There is incubation centers. Again, I think Bangalore had among the first, but now Telangana has T-Hub, which is among the largest in the country. But let's not forget, I mean, I remember when I started my career in Bangalore in the technology industry way back in the late 80s, 90s. We didn't have broadband, what you take for granted. We used to have dial-up phone lines. You took a BSNL line connected to a modem, and you had a 9.6 kbps link. And you had the Software Technology Parks of India, STPI, and an entity which doesn't exist today called Videsh Sanchar Nigam Limited, VSNL. And you went to them and you took a microwave 64 kbps link, you put a tower on your terrace, you oriented the receiver towards either Electronic City, STPI, or to Sona Towers in Miller Road. And that's how the software industry started. Today, we talk about unicorns. Let's not forget, Wipro and Infosys started from this very city. So, you know, I often say that, since you led off with Karnataka and we are in Bangalore, I've often heard this saying that, pardon me, I heard this in Hindi, so I'll give it to you in the original. Silicon Valley ke hawa pani mein magic hai. Magic happens. Arey bhai, Bangalore mein bhi wo magic hai. So, you know, the city accounts for 40% of the total software exports of this country. And we are roughly a $200 billion software services industry. This country accounts for a significant percentage of the 130 billion electronic system design manufacturing industry in India. And many years ago, in one of my avatars, I was the president and CEO of the India Electronics and Semiconductor Association. And I used to make a statement both here and in Delhi. Unfortunately, I used to end up spending more time in Delhi. There is probably no chip in the world which is not touched by Bangalore in some way. It could be VLSI design, it could be verification, it could be software, and definitely apps. So the role of the state, you provide that infrastructure, you provide as I said, physical infrastructure. But again, it started from Bangalore. I've taken that model elsewhere around the country. Startups require a lot more than physical infrastructure. A bunch of bright youngsters come together, mentor networks. It could be mentoring for technology. You could have review boards of experts which could come together. And I remember one of the first networks was here in Bangalore, Karnataka government working together with NASSCOM and IESA to set up mentor networks. It could be assistance for HR, finance and admin, corporate governance, and the state led from the forefront in terms of reimbursement and support for patent filing. Patent filing, very important to protect your innovation for a startup, very expensive. It's about 2 to 3 lakhs at least for each patent. And if you're doing a global PTO, then it's close to 10 plus lakhs. And entrepreneurs can use that money to do a whole bunch of other things. And when the state steps in and says, I will walk hand in hand with you and I will support you, that is when innovation flourishes. And let me just round off my point with one statement. A lot of, especially young entrepreneurs, think it is, the job of the state to support innovation. I'd like to correct them. It's not the job of the state to support innovation for the sake of innovation. Why do countries support innovation? Why do state governments support it? And South Korea, Japan, Israel are shining examples. Countries support it and encourage innovation because it enables them to deliver better, faster, cheaper services, products to their citizens. Second, if you're doing disruption through innovation, and I'm not getting into this whole argument about disruptive versus incremental innovation, and again, one of the finest books on that subject was written by a professor from IIM Bangalore, so let's not go there. But when the state supports innovation and you get disruption, the citizens benefit from, as I said, cheaper, faster, better services. But overall, the other incumbents in the industry also pull up their socks and the whole sector grows. And that is why the role of the state, often overlooked, but very critical for innovation. So I'll stop it at that.
Wonderful, Mr. Menon. Very valuable insights. As Mr. Menon rightly told, state has to look beyond just physical infrastructure, like say few software parks, or roads, or transport networks, or even putting up a metro infra, maybe a good airport. All these are basic minimum things to start. But beyond that, we as a state have focused on very critical infrastructure. What do I mean by these? For example, state doesn't restrict or doesn't get closed with its capital. It's a huge state. So we asked ourselves, why cannot innovation cross borders and go to districts also? So we have come up with this new age innovation network where we have picked up 30 engineering colleges spread across the state, and they will be networked, and already we have funded about 470 projects, 181 prototypes have been built out of this, about 13 patents have been filed. So what I want to impress is state as an enabler should look beyond asset ecosystem which is going stably and start connecting the next dot. Also, coming to these technology business incubators that we have tried, about 5 such technology business incubators in thrust areas like software products, ESDM, robotics, 3D printing, healthcare and biopharma, agriculture and allied fields are our thrust areas. Again, we sort of felt that the standards are very high if a startup has to compete globally. And a startup cannot be left at mercy of various other factors to sort of notch up his standards. That's why we have come up with this idea of centers of excellence with lead players of the industry. Just to name a few, in the field of aerospace and defense, we have brought in our Vishwesvaraya Technological University, along with DASO, and we have been able to do phenomenal sort of headroom into this in aerospace and defense. Coming to Internet of Things, there is a Center of Excellence set up along with NASCOM, basically looking at IoT, AI, data science, big data, AR, VR, machine learning, and robotics. The list is long. We have laid hands on cyber security. We have set up a center of excellence in sync with the Indian Institute of Science. Again, you would have noticed in the field of agri innovation, there is one C camp located in the campus of NCBS, which is actively looking into it. Again, data science and artificial intelligence, we have tied up with NASCOM. The list is very long. There is a COE on semiconductor design, fabless accelerator. Again, AVGC, a very, very sunrise sector, basically looking at animation, visual effects, gaming, and comics. We have roped in ABII and we have set up a center of excellence. Internet of Ethical Things, AI and Robotics Park, a specific ART park. So basically, we have moved on from routine physical infrastructure and are actively looking at as to what could be the next level that we can sort of take this whole effort to. Now, I would like to ask my friend as to we have been speaking of all these at Karnataka. If I have to apply thought at national level, the initiatives like Atmanirbhar Bharat, Digital India, Make in India, they have sort of gone to a different level altogether. What do you feel, Mr. Menon? How can the government adapt and stay current with the changing requirement of innovators and entrepreneurs? Do you see any need of any realignment or any new thrust areas which state, either at state level or central level? What do you think? I have listed out a long list of things which we have done and Government of India is doing in a war footing. I would like to listen from you as to where does it figure out, how does it look like from the perspective of an industry expert. Over to you.
Okay, this is a subject I can go on for hours on, so I'll try and compress it. So you talked about two major initiatives, right? Atmanirbhar Bharat and Digital India. Let's start with the slightly older one, which was Digital India. A lot of people think that Digital India is the famous JAM trilogy, and that's about it. I would offer you an alternate construct. I think Digital India is one of the most brilliant social engineering exercises where you've harnessed digital technology to drive an agenda of social growth, social inclusion. It's very easy to get lost in the detail. Jan Dhan accounts, and the numbers are huge, right? So many Jan Dhan accounts opened. We manufactured last year, I think 200 plus million mobile phones, and we were at the only factory we had, which was Nokia, had shut down in 2012-13 because of the tax issues. So it's easy to get lost in those numbers. But what has Digital India enabled? It has enabled creation of whole new industries. I mean, the gig worker industry, which is so huge today, would not have happened without the underpinning of technology. Atmanirbhar Bharat, I'll come back to it because that is my other big focus on indigenous manufacturing. Essentially, what has happened is that when you have created these market opportunities, you have opened up sectors of the economy and people can contribute, okay? And everything that we talked about in the previous question about the physical incubators, the physical infrastructure for innovation, all of that has happened. But that has happened over the last 10, 12 years. So what next? Atmanirbhar Bharat, the first stage was Make in India, and the entire contract manufacturing industry took off. But there is a problem with that paradigm, and there is a parallel with our BPO industry. We started, Bangalore had several, but the first BPOs came into Gurgaon and Mumbai, and then they came to Bangalore. They went on to other places. You had kids, 20-year-old kids who were taught Srinivasan became Sam, Ramakrishnan became something else, and everyone acquired an American accent. All very good. But just like BPO went away because of cost reasons, and today it's in Philippines and stuff like that. Similarly, the problem with contract manufacturing is that it relentlessly chases the lowest cost paradigm. So if you look back in history, in the 70s, contract manufacturing went from the mainland of the United States. It first went to Mexico, and then it came eastward. It went to Singapore, it went to Taiwan, then it went on to China. The Sino-US tensions accelerated a process that had already happened, because even in China, just like our BPO industry came to Gurgaon and Mumbai, and then came to Bangalore, went to Pune, went on to smaller states like Coimbatore, etc., smaller cities like Coimbatore, etc. Similarly, contract manufacturing started in Shanghai, went inwards. You came up with names of towns and cities in China which no one has ever heard of. And the move to Vietnam had already started. The tensions during the Trump administration just accelerated the process. India is going to go the same way, and already we hear of manufacturing for electronic items coming up in Rwanda. Sri Lanka would have been a destination except for political uncertainty. So then the question comes up, how can you make it sticky? And I think there are lessons we can learn from China, which is that you deepen the ecosystem. And for Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have to transition from make in India to made in India. And what do I say, what do I mean by that? 2012, when I was running IESA, I coined a slogan, innovation-led design, design-led manufacturing. And if you sort of double click on it, you find problems in emerging markets. India is a very large country. It has very complex problems. And if you can find an innovative solution for India, you can be sure as hell that solution will work in many markets. Maybe it will not work in Western Europe or in the more developed parts. It will not work in California or the East Coast, but it will certainly work in the Midwest of the United States. It will work in Latin America. It will work in Africa. It will work in some parts of Southeast Asia. And these are huge markets. So when you look at made in India, and if you start focusing on design, if you start focusing on components, and you start capturing value. And I'm going to give you this example from electronics, because that's an industry I know very well. In the electronics industry, we have the concept of BOM, bill of material. And BOM into, let's say, 2.5x is the relationship between the cost at which you buy the product and the cost at which the product is made. Significant part of that cost is intellectual property. It is software, it is design, it is how disruptive the product is. And those are our strengths. Remember, our $200 billion software industry has showcased our pharma industry, which is again racing to global scale. These two sectors have demonstrated that if we can harness the power of youth, if we can harness the power of innovation, we can grow mega-sized industries. In these opening remarks, Dr. Batra talked about the vision of the $3 trillion economy, going to the $10 trillion economy. And a lot of that is not going to happen from plain vanilla services. It is going to happen from how can you capture value within the country. And that is where I think the next stage has to be all about that. So you asked me, Dr. Harsha, for prescriptions. I think startups have several challenges that they face. If I look at startups which have to manufacture in India, there is a well-documented 20 to 25% structural disability to manufacturing in India. So if you can give an incentivization scheme, the production-linked incentive, or the PLI scheme of the government of India is one of those, right? So if structurally that can be addressed, and states are stepping up now, one of the southern states, not Karnataka unfortunately, had come up with concept of standard design factories, where entrepreneurs could just move in with equipment. These were specially designated zones, so some of the labor laws were tweaked. So for example, if you're running 3 shifts for electronics manufacturing, I don't know how many of you are aware, but 50% of the workforce for electronics manufacturing are women. And you allow women to work in the third shift. Now, several states do it. Karnataka has also done it. You've got Vistron and Kolar, which is a very large employer of women. But many states do it on an annualized basis. And when companies are going to invest into large facilities, they need policy stability. They need an outlook for 10 years. And an annually rolling permission creates uncertainty. So one is that. Second, you talked about preferential market access for startups. Important because startups struggle with getting access. Now, you look at any government tender, there are several conditions. You should be on the Gartner fourth quadrant. You double click that requirement, the Gartner fourth quadrant says you should have X number of offices, you should have X number of factories, X number of people. So, and how is that relevant if you're going to create a highly specialized service which is available to a particular segment of the country? Third, if you can reserve a percentage of demand coming from the government for the startup community and link it not on technical qualifications. Some of you may be aware, government tenders run on T1 and L1. T1 is the technical specifications for that product or service, L1 is the price consideration. So if you don't relax the requirements remain where they are, but enable the startup to meet the pricing requirement and do it through smart moves. So for example, there is an OECD study which says that 33% of all demand in developing countries is from the government, the federal government, the state government, PSU, central and state. If you aggregate it, 33% of all demand is from the government. And if you say that I will only source for government, I will only source products and services of course will have a significant domestic component, but if you say that I will only source products which have 50% or above domestic component, what you are doing is you are reorienting global supply chains. So in 2020, when we had the lockdown, I'd written an article which came in the Economic Times, and I said, let's not waste this crisis, because let us use the opportunity of this pandemic and the lockdown to reorient this. Make no mistake, when you get people advocating, and there is a story recently, one of the industry associations has said, we should enable Chinese companies to sell into India. What is behind that? Just consider a moment. The moment you say that I will put a basics customs duty barrier to make sure that any technology product which is not covered under ITA 1 rules of the World Trade Organization will have to meet certain localization norms, what you are saying is global supply chains will reorient. And the moment you reorient, remember the core industry may not be very employment intensive, but the ancillaries certainly are. So many of you would have seen the discussion in the papers about the 76,000 crore semiconductor PLI scheme. There are huge numbers. There are several zeros on any of those. So you want to set up a semiconductor fabrication facility to make chips in this country, you're talking about $8 billion of capex upfront. That fab will not employ too many people. The core fab employs probably 500 people. But there is an ecosystem around it. And that ecosystem, whether it is HVAC, whether it is water purification, whether it is wastewater management, whether it is logistics, gases, supply, each of those are sub-ecosystems which employ tremendous amount of manpower. And while the primary employment may not be significant, the secondary and tertiary balloon. And that is where the state, if it says, I will create policies which enable local industry, local startups with value addition to sell here. And Dr. Harsha, you raised an important point. If we don't support our entrepreneurs, who will? Gladdened my heart, because last year in Delhi I was talking and I said, if the government of India doesn't support Indian companies, do we expect the government of China to support our companies? So thank you for making that statement.
Wonderful, wonderful. You have touched upon majority of the very critical part of the whole thing. Although I would like to move on and sort of take it forward. One of the very crucial points made was the support kind of a thing wherein first part would be incentivizing. Okay, that I'll take up later. But for a startup which is going through its survival struggle, that first round of funding becomes extremely critical. We notice that there is a lot of hesitancy from organized venture capital groups to sort of look at very primitive, very proof of concept stage kind of startups. That's why we stepped in. All of you would agree with me that our Elevate program of state of Karnataka is one of the most sort of forward-looking, wherein we have even touched base with very primary stage startups. I'm proud to say that we have so far funded about 725 startups under Elevate 100, and the funding at a very initial stage is quite significant, something like 50 lakhs to start with. So we have deployed around 150 crores on these about 725 startups. We have gone beyond, and we have come up with something called as Amrit Startup Initiative, wherein we have taken it to the less privileged segments, the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, minorities, did huge relaxation in entry-level barriers. On the parallel track, we have been running something called as Grand Challenges of Karnataka. This is a unique program wherein we have been supporting ITBT, SNT, and other areas. To just list out, we have moved on from this classical Elevate to Elevate Unnati and Elevate Women Entrepreneurship, and we have set up something called as Beyond Bangalore Cluster Seed Fund. Kitwen has been sort of acknowledged as one of the most important venture capital funds which the state government set up way back. And we have deployed around 160 crores so far. And this has subsequently led into enthusiasm from organized fund houses, organized VCs. Lot of success stories, lot of unicorns have sort of made use of these initiatives. I think with the whole thing, I think now I leave the floor open for a couple of questions so that we can sort of come back with precise kind of inputs, whatever arise. The floor is open to the August House.
Yeah, Dr. Harsha, let me ask you this. That, in my 21 years of entrepreneurship, starting Exchange for Media and then getting involved with business world, he referred to the IT services industry being $300 billion company. But one of the things I've been asking is that we don't build product companies from India. Do you see that changing over the next 3 years? I welcome your comment. Have we finally started building product companies, or we still have a long way to go?
Let me hear to Mr. Menon first, from the industry perspective.
If I step away from technology for a moment, let's look at one of the finest brands in watches, Titan. And the Titan Edge, the thinnest watch in the world, even today. Introduced in 2002, 20 years later, it is still the thinnest watch in the world. That watch was designed in Old Airport Road, manufactured in Hosur, 70 kilometers out of Bangalore, even today. So, but that's an exception. If I look, and of course the story of the Tata Nano, the most innovative thing. But the challenge is going to be that, and I have no hesitation in saying this, though I probably will get into trouble with some of the people in the audience. We have a problem with product management in this country. People know how to manage projects. You get specifications from anywhere in the world, and you know how to go out and execute on that. But there is a chasm to be crossed from executing against a spec to writing that spec yourself. I've run global product lines, and trust me, I used to I had engineering teams literally around the world. And the hardest job was to make the teams in India understand. Sometimes in product management, you ask them to take what is called a leap of faith. And that becomes a problem. So unless we can solve that of going from being consumers of our engineering specifications and executioners of that to being the creators of that, we will not go and have products of our own. And products are extremely important. Look at brands, Apple, Cisco, all of them have become multi-billion-dollar corporations because they understood that game. So I'll stop here.
I will take a different look at this. Government definitely is looking at organized sectors like IT or any of these organized automotives or automobiles. But we have moved beyond. Our hope now is from basic fundamental areas which can spin products like, say, toys. We have invested hugely on a toy cluster in remote hinterland, wherein we are looking forward for an investment of 1,500 crores. What would we achieve by this? We would achieve a product cluster which will enable the entire population to get involved, products which seriously can make a difference to huge number of lives, can generate a lot of employment opportunities, and which will sort of have a global appeal for a longer period of time. Who hasn't seen Chenpatna toys? Who hasn't seen those wonderful artifacts of Mysore? So I'm not saying we have moved on only to that, but I'm saying we are even looking at that perspective. Also, we are, as a state, we have been supportive of sectors like garments to come up with new products. Basically, as a welfare state, our take on products would be such products which can spin jobs for us, which can create a larger base wherein the economy operates. I am hopeful, coming back to your basic question, I am hopeful next 3 years or 5 years are going to see a significant change. We should be able to get more products companies doing well and doing well for a larger segment of the society. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. My question is, you were talking about innovation and new designs to sustain all our economy and industry. But doing that, we have to keep in mind so many factors like global warming, then green energy production, then reducing carbon footprint. So every product we design from now on, we should keep these things in mind. So we have to also develop research centers to look into these aspects to the and the materials used to develop the product, which doesn't contribute to all this carbon footprint to reduce that. And even renewable sources like solar, wind, they're also limited because of throughout the, it depends on how the weather is throughout the year. So we have to look at other resources like tidal energy and these kind of things, which seems to be perennial for our energy production. And finally, we have to look at in this whole framework to develop our new products, I thought.
Sir, you have touched upon a very, very globally relevant thought process. I would like to just reflect upon it. I don't see a specific answer or a specific question involved here, but it involves each one of us sitting in this room as to what are we leaving the next generation to live in. Sir, I would like to draw your attention to as it is happening today. Please sit down. Kindly sit down. See, London yesterday has recorded 40 degrees. Okay, 40 degrees centigrade, which is a first in the history. Europe is burning with wildfires, which was never heard of in the past. Australia, specifically Sydney, has received 300 millimeters of rain on a single day, which would be the same, maybe an annual rainfall at many of our places in India. What does it speak of? It speaks of what the gentleman just now flagged. So, as we speak of development, as we speak of fast-paced wealth creation, we should also look at what is the value created. We should not restrict ourselves to valuation alone. Also, we should move beyond profits towards profile. What is that am I creating? What is that disruption should not just be at the technology level. Disruption should also help and sustain this fragile planet. Just to add to where government stands on this, sir, you would appreciate that we are the first one to seriously take note of this. Our electrical vehicle policy goes at length in addressing these concerns. We are invested big time into it. We are very keen to protect our natural resources, to reduce the carbon footprint. Not only that, you spoke of the larger concerns of sustainability of, say, water resources. So there are huge list of things which should be done to save ourselves from the catastrophes of the global warming. If we speak of our own state, we have been seeing some phenomenal kind of floods which were never there. I am telling this being a student of wildlife. I am a PhD student of wildlife and management. Lot of our precious patches in Western Ghats are just disappearing. Biodiversity is at a threat level which was never there. If we behave in the same way, then majority of the species will get pushed into that red category of IUCN classification. So these are fine, high-sounding words. But what is the action plan? Action plan is definitely all governments are in tune with this. Even public figures are doing high decibel campaigns on saving rivers, saving soil and all. But it should begin at home. We should see to that. We should cut down our consumeristic activity, attitude, cut down on the plastic usage, become a responsible citizen. Look at the impact that we are leaving with each act of ours. I think the millennials are definitely aware of realities. I'm very hopeful the startups which are being led by brilliant minds will definitely take care of these and would definitely enjoy a much more sustainable world and leave behind for the next generation. Mr. Menon, please.
Yeah, I'll just talk about two industry initiatives. One which I was involved in, I think 2011-12 timeframe. I don't know how many of you are aware, but we sell about 20 million ceiling fans every year in this country. And back in those days, we led an initiative called 3E, Electronics for Energy Efficiency. This is 10, 12 years back. And we worked with the electronics industry to develop a small controller into the fan motors, which cut the consumption by 50%, electricity consumption. Now, Bangalore is a naturally air-conditioned city, but if you look at North India, most of these fans run for at least 20 hours a day. And if you can cut energy consumption by half, you are basically eliminating a couple of generation stations. That's how industry has used technology to drive sustainability. Second, this was a global initiative. I think it was led by Nokia. A lot of us at home, our cell phone chargers are just plugged in. You plug your phone, you unplug it, you walk out. When you come back, you plug it in. These chargers were taking about 4 watts in standby power, even when there was no load connected. And they put it in a small circuit. Today, it's mandatory in all cell phone chargers. And today, your standby power is 0.5 watts. That's how industry has responded, and that's how the sustainability agenda is driven. You use technology for social good and to save the planet.
I think we'll take one last question and then. Madam, I would like to hear to you. Yeah.
Sir, actually, I have a question. Like all the aircrafts got manufactured in HAL, but it is sent to US to get US certification. And number two question, all the medicines from India, made in India, it goes to Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania. Then from Africa, it goes to US to get US certification. Third is like, as we spoke about EV buses. So the EV like JBM, what we have presently in Bangalore, so it is based out of Mathura. So all the spare parts come from China, they assemble and they run it. So we are also planning to come up with EV buses. But the issue is again, we have to outsource all the things from China or from South Korea. So that is a major challenge which our India is facing. Why? The thing is like the cost goes up. So it is non-affordable. So why can't we get a certification of, certified by India? So it's a food for thought.
Madam, I think it's a very valid point. But I think operating in a global economy, there are certain standard certifications which I would presume. But definitely, India has made significant progress on this, wherein we are moving parallelly with those norms. For example, if you look at emission norms, gone are those days wherein we spoke of only Euro norms. Now Bharat 6 is globally looked at as on par with Euro norms. Industries each industry may have a different set of such barriers when it comes to certifications. But to my thinking, Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India campaign were specifically designed to address these. Madam, I can confidently tell you, in even sectors like defense, now guys who manufacture out of Bangalore, Cisco is forced to take note of them. And I'm not saying they have snatched away the business of Cisco totally. I'm just taking a name. But definitely our local entrepreneurs have made a huge, huge difference. So definitely a day would come wherein the supply chain should get stabilized, and an entrepreneur need not look beyond India to either for certifications or for sourcing the supply chain. This is what is my take. Mr. Menon?
Yeah, I will just add to this. I've led some of the committees at BIS, and Dr. Harsha is absolutely on target. We want to build global companies who are part of the global value chains, GVCs. Otherwise, you can't scale. And if you do that, then you have to look at what the world is doing. The lady mentioned about aircraft certification. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Type C for Boeing 737s are now being done in India. I think they go abroad only for the more complicated checks. And India is emerging as an MRO hub. So I think you'll see that. But if you want to sell globally, and I think all entrepreneurs should aspire to do global products, you will have to follow what the global certifications are. So whether it is FDA approval, FAA approval, type rating, those are, what the rest of the world accepts is what is done in the US and Europe. And you will have to do that. There is no alternative to that.
I have a,
We'll take that last question.
Yeah.
Huh? Please go ahead.
Thank you. You say all startups cannot become unicorns. And the scalability of many startups is doubted. Who is the funding agency for startups which need to grow in a linear fashion? I don't expect them to go, in a geometrical fashion, but at least linearly it should grow. Many startups die early death. So you want to make every startup a unicorn, you need to support them and give them, observe the potential and see if it can be utilized by the industry. Because the investor will look for ROI. So we should look for investors, like for example defense. We make military aircraft and we encourage many startups in the beginning. But after 2 orders go to them, they wind up because there won't be further orders. The volume is 0. So startups should be, if you want to make every startup a unicorn, you need to support them give them sufficient funds and give them sufficient time and see the scalability of that startup. Thank you.
Sir, I would just like to sort of comment on it. It's not an answer or something like that. Sir, I think unicorn is more of a mindset. You see, you can't push everyone to get valued at $1 billion. That may not be even the ambition of a entrepreneur in every case. I see it more as a mindset wherein every entrepreneur who has just started as a bootstrap or whatever, wants to achieve the highest standards of his industry, wants to sort of take over that big a market space that is possible in his domain. I think that's where one should start. The second valid observation by you, that who would fund? I think you missed out on my list of things. Maybe I was not very elaborate. I told you the government's efforts. There is a big organized VC atmosphere ecosystem. I am not touching it. But to cater to such basic needs, we have announced our Elevate 100. As I was just mentioning you, we have supported 725 startups, which are just proof of concept kind of startups. We have even gone beyond. I told you we have relaxed the criteria to enter this game in specific cases. We have even announced something called Elevate Unnati, wherein we have sort of 75 startups which are handpicked. SC/ST entrepreneurs, backward classes entrepreneurs, all these have been brought in. Women entrepreneurship has again found space in our Elevate Women Entrepreneurship program. So basically government has pitched in to fill this gap. Whatever viability gap we are speaking of, as you rightly told, a startup who may have done a best of the effort may not be able to sustain beyond 2 orders. This is precisely where we are coming in. And let me tell you, we are very proud that this program has 2 bigger rounds of funding from organized VC houses, which have in fact allowed them to become unicorns. So just to conclude, definitely not every startup can become, every startup cannot become a unicorn. It's more of a mindset. As a state, we are interested that we support every player out in the field to create jobs, to create that value addition to a state, so that we cater to a larger segment of economy. We create a world which is equal and fair to everyone. I think at this stage, I would like to just conclude that when I look at the entire distance that both of us have covered, myself and Mr. Menon, both of us feel that definitely this is a win-win kind of a situation wherein every entrepreneur should join hands with state. When I mean state, it may be government of India or government of any particular state. They should join hands. They should find those common grounds on which they can collaborate, be it infrastructure, be it mentor networks, be it funding, be it relaxing regulatory networks. Every state is now very positive on all these. Karnataka has been a pioneer. In fact, later in the evening, my Honorable Chief Minister would address the same gathering. He has some brilliant ideas as to how we can take forward. Again, I thank the business world team. I think I have run out of the time. So
just last.
Yeah.
So actually, it's not a question. It's more of a suggestion on your aspect that you brought in, that extinction of species and species might end up in the ICU and red list and all of that, and how you are urging citizens to actually reduce consumeristic behavior and all of that. So it was just a suggestion that can't the government actually engage a lot of social media celebrities? Like these days, Instagram is actually very popular. So engaging social media celebrities to influence citizens' behavior in terms of reducing consumeristic behavior. Also, as Amitabh Kant, Mr. Amitabh Kant, you must be knowing, now he's G20 Sherpa. He did in Kerala God's Own Countries campaign, brought in a lot of Bollywood celebrities, influenced a lot of state of tourism and all of that. So if you can actually, if it's just a suggestion, sir, you are the commissioner and all. So if you can actually put in this policy suggestion that you can actually engage a lot of social media celebrities who will be building, who have a great number of followers, who can actually influence people to reduce their consumeristic attitude. So this was just a suggestion. It's not
wonderful suggestion. Wonderful suggestion. We have already begun in that direction. Definitely we'll take note of this and will definitely move in that direction. So once again, I thank BW team and the audience of this esteemed session to have lent us so much of support and for having been such excellent audience. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Thank you.